Welcome to everyone on the webinar this morning and those who will be joining over the next minute or two. My name is Chris Pitt. I am Group Impact Director at the Benefact Group, and I'm just going to spend a minute or two telling you a little bit about us. And hopefully you'll find that interesting because we know a lot of charities and we want to get to know a lot more. And I'm going to then hand you over to Layla, so the main event, to talk about this fantastic topic of fundraising events. And I really enjoy the opportunity to talk to charities like this, because actually I know, looking at the attendee list, that many of you are friends of ours already. So we know you, we've given you grants and donations, and we've supported you in other ways. And for anyone that isn't, we want to bring you into that fold. So we want you to be one of those charities we have supported, that we do give to. So yeah, please do get to know us. Just a bit of a practicality of this webinar. So it's an hour and a half. We're going to have an hour of conversation. With Layla talking through the slides in front of you, and then 30 minutes Q&A. Very kindly, many of you have submitted some questions. And many of them are going to be covered in the presentation that we do. Some might not be, so we can pick those up at the end. And as you have already found out, you can use the Q&A function. So if there's something that comes up that you really want addressed, please do chuck it in there, and we'll hopefully cover it during the session, or we can cover it at the end. This webinar is recorded, just so you're aware of that. There are no fire tests or anything like that, even though the fire alarm did just go here. So the main thing is to grab a cup of tea or coffee, settle in, and hopefully this will be a really, really helpful session. So just to say very, very briefly about the Benefact Group, as the slides just showed you briefly there, we are the 4th largest corporate donor. We are a group of ethical and responsible financial services businesses, covering insurance, investment and broking advisory. We are different because of that attitude and that approach to business. All of our businesses share those values, and we're particularly different because we're owned by a charitable trust. So all of the profits that we make go to good causes like you. So that's why we particularly want to know you better. One really, really fantastic way that you can get a slice of that giving is our Move for Good program, which I think is on that slide there, just in front of you. And I love talking about this because you can apply now. So don't ignore me and go off and apply. Perhaps do it after the webinar. But we offer £1,000 donations to any and every charity anywhere doing anything. So the map there highlights the donations that we've made over the last couple of years through this program. So it's movingforgood.com. You just need to fill in your charity details. It's linked to the Charity Information Database, actually. So you just need to put in your name and it'll find you, and you are nominated. You're in that part. You're in with a chance to receive a £1,000 donation to support you in any way that you want. We are all set to distribute another £250,000 over the coming weeks. And we will be again distributing 120,000 in the run up to Christmas as well. So these small grants keep on coming, and we'll be giving them constantly. So please do get online and look at that and get involved, and encourage your supporters to do the same, because the more nominations you get, the more opportunity you have receiving a donation. And on the next slide, I just wanted to highlight that giving is really important to us. It's what our business model is completely centered around. We want to deliver profits that give to good causes, but we do recognize actually that we can never give enough. Just the charities on this call, the funding requirements that you will have to deliver your work are more than we could ever imagine. So we've got to find more ways to support charities, more ways to enable you to raise funds, and more ways to support you to be better charities, to run yourself better, to be more effective in your work. So that's why we're expanding our work into fundraising resources. And there is some resources on our website here, so benefactgroup.com. And I think, this is an example of it. Hopefully, this is providing you with some advice and support, which is going to enable you to think about how you do what you do and work better in the future. And finally, just got 2 quick slides here on our experience of fundraising events, and hopefully we might come back to this throughout the presentation. But we're a corporate, a business like any other. We're not huge. We're getting on for 2,000 people, mainly UK based, some overseas. We've got a main head office, which I'm sat in now with 700 people in it, and other offices based around, some very small. And fundraising and giving is obviously fundamental to us, our business and our culture. We have a program called My Giving, which is our employee supported giving program. And basically, and I think this is probably the essence of a lot of giving programs out there, but ours is particularly strong, is we match efforts. So whatever our employees want to get behind, we are behind them 100%. So we give them donations to give to good causes. So they get personal grants, that they're called. And we double all fundraising, all payroll giving. And I will hand over to Layla very shortly, but just to say a few things, and I'll probably reflect on this during the conversation, that what we've seen over the past months and years as far as fundraising events is concerned. Well, they took a real hit in COVID, and that's stating the obvious. But I think our people responded with trying to find ways to help make them happen. And because of that need and that want to support causes that they care about, and for human connection, to be together. So we found ways, actually. And this year, I think fundraising has come back stronger. So fundraising events have really been embraced by our people. So I think we're to the tune of £70,000 plus raised by our people, which we double, so 150,000 plus going to good causes. And some of the kind of traditional events and activities that you might expect, some of the charity runs and those kind of things, but probably a bit of an emphasis on the social, actually, that people wanting to be together for a fantastic reason, and a fundraising event has definitely got to be that. So I'll leave it there. I'll pass over to Layla, but I'm here to answer any questions and to support Layla in this conversation. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar. I think you're just on mute, Layla.
Thank you, Chris. Apologies, I was on mute. Thank you for your time. And yes, I will drag Chris in to interject, particularly if I'm covering anything to do with corporates, as that works really, really well. I'll be doing an hour, and then you'll be going on to Kathy, who will run the Q&A session. I know that some of you have already sent some questions. Some of the slides, I won't go into that much detail, but they will be on the recording, so you'll be able to see it, because there's only so much I can cover, and I'm going to cover the most relevant bits. And hopefully some of the questions that you'd previously sent, some will be answered in this anyway, and others hopefully will be able to look at in the Q&A. The first thing I want to say is I want to echo what Chris said, is that I think people are now starved and are desperate to get back into some kind of event. And it all feels very strange when they're in the room full of people, but equally there's something quite euphoric about it. But then also different parts of the country still have different rules post-COVID and different things to get used to. So there's a lot of that to be able to think about, which we'll start to talk about a bit as well. But one thing I want to say is loyal supporters are a must-have if you want to have long-term sustainable core income. And I'm focusing on core income because core income's a really, really good way of getting unrestricted money, and which means that you have the flexibility to spend it on what you feel is right in your charity. And events is a really good way of giving you that unrestricted income. So it's not particularly project focused. So that's one thing to kind of bear in mind, but you need those kind of loyal supporters. And if you have a great event, you're going to want more. And I think, something that's going to be talked about, so people can say, oh God, I love their events, I'm definitely going to go again. So reputation is really, really key in events. But also you've got to bear in mind that as much as it all seems glamorous, there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes. And if you want your event to be successful, you need to A, have objectives, and B, able to meet them and not forget them. So a few thoughts to start with. I think it's very, very important that before you go ahead and plan an event, to really sit down with your team and think, is events the right avenue for us at this point in time? I'm not saying that it wouldn't be down the line, but is it right now? Do we have the resources? Can we afford it? Why are we doing it? What's their objective? And I would say, and I will cover that down the line as well, I would say, don't try and have more than 2 objectives. One specific one, 2 at the most. Is events the only way? Or can you do it online instead? And, you know, think about, will your audience spend the money under the current climate? And what about COVID rules and your audience and how they feel about it? So start to really have these debates and discussions before you even start planning. You know, I always say with events, we get carried away and we even start deciding on a font for our menu before we've actually really thought about the fundamentals. So really start to think about these things. And you know, think about, okay, if we are going to have an event, can we have all the costs up front so that actually saves our audience spending more money at the events? Because sometimes with fundraising events, people pay for entry, but then there's lots of things happening during the event where they can spend money on, and the idea is, you know, you make more and more money. But think about, okay, well, right now under the current climate, people might want to feel that they've paid for it up front, they know what their budget is, and they come and they just enjoy themselves. But is that going to make you the money that you need? So again, things to think about. I always start my sessions with things for you to start thinking about. Can you get it sponsored? Never assume you can get it sponsored. Unless that sponsorship money is in the bank, you are at 0 for sponsorship. So always think about it. Don't kind of assume that, oh, we have some contacts, it'll get sponsored. No, never assume, because corporates, as Chris will probably tell you afterwards, are faced with so many requests, and it's not easy for them to choose all of them. So it's really thinking, you know, making sure that actually that's a given rather than an assumption. And also, anything you can get pro bono, you know, is it a given? You know, quite often what the fundamental things like a venue, for example, you have pro bono. What if something happens last minute and you haven't got a backup? So again, pro bono has got to be a certainty. Volunteers, which I'm going to talk about, again, it's really, really key and important. But most importantly, why are we doing this? And why do you need to hold an event? So really think about these things, discuss them, because you might find that at the end of this discussion, you might go, actually, right now, we don't need it. We can't cover some of these rules, or we haven't got the resources, and we don't really have a real rationale for holding an event, in which case that's okay. It doesn't mean you can never do it. It just means that right now it's not for you. And actually, when you think about what is events fundraising in the first place, you know, it's a fundraiser, which is usually is an event or a campaign, and the primary purpose is to raise money. The secondary purpose obviously is to raise awareness. They go in hand in hand. It's a great way to involve different people and community. And by community, it doesn't necessarily mean a local community, or if you work in a hospice, which most of the time events are great for. It's not always about local community. Your community could be your audience. So your community could be schools. Your community could be the older generation. What is your community? Define that, what, you know. So, but it's a way of raising awareness in an engaging way, fun way. It's also a way of reaching new audiences and a new supporter base. So building on your current supporter base, but also building a new one. So again, thinking about it, within the fundraising mix, you've got all these different aspects. You've got major donors, community, companies, trusts, lottery, government, EU, obviously the Brexit effect, so that'll be defunct. And then you've got events, social media, online, and Just Giving and crowdfunding. The ones I've highlighted in red really can amalgamate with events, because you can have an event where you're trying to capture major donors. You could have an event where you're trying to capture smaller donors, like, you know, people that give smaller donations but become loyal, ongoing supporters. Your events could be social media and online, and they could be using Just Giving and crowdfunding. So there is an amalgamation when you look at the fundraising mix, and where events can go into different avenues of the mix. And the reason why events is potentially good for you is that it gives you a chance to diversify your fundraising income generation methods. And, you know, if it's something that actually works, and it could be slightly longer term or annually, it could give you the chance to have that kind of durable, reliable source of income that you know is going to happen, because you've got that loyal supporters and you've got the track record. and makes your fundraising mix more sustainable, because if events is helping you have more major donors, then that will have a good impact on your major donors. If events is helping you build your community, then that will give an impact to your community as well. And therefore it reduces the risk of having everything concentrated in one aspect. And like I said, will help with core funding. So really think about this. And the reason why I focus on this is because, you know, people always expect to go right into the nitty-gritty. Oh, how do we organize an event? But it's, if you don't get the fundamentals right, there's no point, even if you organize an event, if you haven't got the background right, it's not going to be a success. So really think about your primary purpose. And for many, it's undoubtedly going to be to raise money for your cause. For others, it may not be. It might be we have an event for a complete different reason right now. It could be we have to raise awareness. We've got to get some information out there, or we just need to be able to get different people on board. For some, it might be because they want to get a particular sector on board. For others, they might want to raise awareness in a particular way to a particular audience. So really think about it, and don't clutter your event with too many objectives. One at the most, one mainly, and two at the most, because otherwise, you know, it will not be a success. You're spreading yourself too thinly. With focus objectives and smaller objectives, you'll have more of a success in your event. So again, think about, you know, is there an organizational strategy? And what does it say about fundraising? Where are you hoping to go? You know, a special events program is quite different to community events. Special events is something that could be more catered to major donors, whereas community events could be like fun runs or school events or Rotary clubs, or, you know. So again, which strategic direction are you going to go to that fits within your fundraising strategy? Again, the importance of clear objectives, and usually you would have done, hopefully, a SWOT and a PEST. So that's looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and looking at what's going on externally, politically, economically, socially, and in the world of technology. And also the PEST has become PESTLE, which is also legal and environment, and timing of activities. If you're going to go into events fundraising, do a SWOT and a PESTLE, because it's important to actually look at what are your strengths internally. And you might be able to say, well, we've got a great reputation, but our weakness is that we have no capacity. We have the opportunity of getting lots of pro bono, but actually a threat or a barrier could be that, you know, there's people similar to us doing what we're doing in our area, so therefore we might not be able to be in competition. You need to be able to lay it out in front of you, so you're quite clear before you go gung-ho to organize an event, where you're at, where's your positioning, what's going on, and your weaknesses, can you change them into strengths and opportunities? Because if there's strong weaknesses are going to be a barrier, then that's a non-starter. Think about what's happening right now. So for example, with the Queen's passing, you know, there could be, you know, a lot of things have been cancelled. So again, you know, I mean, obviously this is a very unique situation, but you will have situations like this where something happens socially or something happens economically or politically, which means that it's not appropriate for you to have your event, or you can't have your event, or things close down. Some legal implications might come into place, or environmental factors which you might not have considered, where you suddenly think actually it's not appropriate for us to have it. So map it all out, and is, you know, if you're going to take away anything from today, is sit with your team and just really do a SWOT and a PESTLE first when it comes to events fundraising, to see actually what you need to change in order for you to actually go ahead and carry out events. There's different types of events. You've got special events, could be large, medium, or small scale. So you really think about it as a project. You know, how big a scale are we talking about? Therefore, what resources do I need? That could be a ball, auctions, car booth sales, golf events, school fairs, a party, for example, with Macmillan. The way they've done it is quite clever, where they're using their volunteers and their supporters to do stuff themselves within their own environment, to their own friendship groups, and then raise money and donate it to the charity. So it's, again, understanding your audience, which we're going to touch on. And you've got sports events, which now are coming back into fruition again. Obviously with COVID, a lot of it stopped, but people are now starting to get back onto it. But then be mindful that, you know, are people getting tired of their friends constantly asking them for sponsorship for every, you know, everything they do, marathon, 5Ks, 10Ks, you know, how are you going to make yours slightly different? Or it might be a conference, it might be an informative stuff, or online. Again, online we'll touch on it soon, because online again has really picked up during COVID, and it's worked on many levels, but on some levels people are desperate to go back to face. So again, it's gauging what's going to be best for you. What's your online community? It's really important to understand that. It's the importance of social media. Social media has just changed massively, especially over the last 2 years when we're so reliant on it. The younger audience rely on it. A lot happens on your phone. People donate on their phone. People find out about things on their phone. People fill in surveys on their phone. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, online donation tools are massive now, because people just don't really fancy logging on. They just want to do it on their phone. But, you know, you want to facilitate the whole process. Things happening on Zoom, Teams, other platforms. So again, it's been a massive shift, and you sit down and think, actually, are we prepared for that shift as well? Where are we at in terms of our technology? This is quite important when it comes to events, is who's your audience. And the audience and beneficiaries, for many of you, are not the same. If you're an arts organization, for example, let's say you know, an art gallery, your audience and beneficiaries will overlap, because people that come and benefit from coming to an exhibition could also be a supporter. Whereas if you work in a hospice, your beneficiaries and your laws and your supporters are not the same. You might get people who are families of your beneficiaries, but again, you know, you tend to be asking your supporters for money, not necessarily your beneficiaries, unless you're an arts organization, so, or a gallery or a museum. So again, differentiate that and understand the kind of sensitivities that can go into it. And it's, for events and generally for fundraising, the most important thing is you must know your audience, because knowing your audience shows that respect, and it really gives you the ability to be able to engage with them because you know them. So again, here you can have a massive rave, we can have a quite classical concert. You know, don't assume that one event will cater for all, because it's not necessarily the way. You might have more than one type of audience. So when you're throwing an event, who is it going to be for? Which audience are you going to do it for? And if you're going to do one that caters for all, what's going to be an event that will generically work? So again, lots of food for thought. Understanding your audience's feelings, because knowing yourself and knowing your audience, think about, how would I feel about going to this event? What would motivate me? So these are conversations that you need to have before you decide on organizing an event. And obviously these slides will be on the recording afterwards, so you'll be able to see it. Who's your audience, or who your audience is? What are their expectations? I can't tell you that. This is something that you will know, you need to find out. And if you feel you don't know, you could think about you know, cost-effective ways of doing it, thinking of what is it you need to know, and can you do it on a quick Survey Monkey? You know, where is your audience? You know, if you have an event, are they willing to travel? What is it they need? What puts them off financially, the status, kind of physical aspect of things? What's going to stop them from coming? And you must never not incorporate that. Think about what would stop them. Put it all down and think, right, that could stop them. How are we going to change that? And also, how are we going to work around our marketing in order to promote our event? And it's not just the people that come to an event. We've got other audiences. We've got the press. Can we get the press involved? Can they promote it? Can our trustees promote it? You know, if you're going to do it online, how do people feel about it? Is this a kind of event that's going to work online? And will it be value for money? Ask yourself that question. Put it in front of yourself and go, would I pay this much for this particular event? Do I believe I'll get value for money? Because if you're doubting that yourself, the chances are your audience will too. If you look at your audience segmentation, you think, well, is it regional, local? What's our audience age? What are they interested in? How committed are they? How frequently can we rely on them? Do they have disposable income? Because, for example, if it's a children's charity, you really are aiming at the parents, and they're the ones with disposable income, not the children. What communication style do they prefer? If you're working, if your audience are older people, how do they feel on social media? You know, how would they, how would they feel about an online event? Volunteers, what type of volunteers do you have? And are any of those proactive in helping you with events? Or are they reactive? Are you proactive or are you reactive? Because if you're reacting to an existing event, did you monitor that event to see whether it went well or not? So really, try and look at your audience and understand that as well. It's very, very, very crucial for you to know what motivates them. And then you've got your key message. I hope I'm not going through this too fast. It's the best I can do it in the amount of time we've got, but I'm trying to go through the key points for you to really think about. But hopefully with the recording, you'll be able to kind of absorb it a bit more. Every charity will have a key message, will have an overall vision and a mission. And that needs to be consistent. Your key message needs to be consistent. However, when you're organizing events, there'll be other messages which that particular event would need to receive and is relevant to them. It's not taking it away from your overall key message, but that event may be communicating something else. And also, is there anything unique about you? You know, just think about the fact that you're local. Is that unique? Or it might be unique because you're the only one locally that does what you do. So what's your unique selling point? And really think about that, because then you need to reflect that on what's so unique about your event. Why would people want to come to you? What's so different that would make them kind of go, oh, I think I'll go to this over that. So your right message for your audience and consistency is key. Objectives. What do you want and why are you doing it? What is it you want from this event? Okay. Why are you doing it? This has to be nailed right at the beginning. Okay. You cannot go into organizing an event and being uncertain about your objectives. It's got to be nailed right at the beginning. And it's got to be measurable. It's going to be very specific. We are doing this because we want to raise money, or we are doing this because we want to raise awareness. It's got to be measurable. So if you're raising money, you need to be able to measure, well, yes, we've spent this much and we've raised this amount. And yes, we know we've raised money because we can measure it. To raise awareness, how are you going to measure it? What are you going to put in place for you to know that actually you have raised awareness? Saying it isn't enough. It's having being able to really understand, what am I going to put in place to measure this? Is it attainable and achievable? Based on the resources you have, is it something that's, too big right now, or is it something that you feel you could do? And again, that's, is it realistic? And is it relevant? Don't do an event for the sake of it, because it's just not a good idea. Is it relevant? Otherwise, people are kind of going to go, why is this happening? But equally, sometimes you can really think about doing something that actually you're getting a new audience in, and it's not necessarily relevant to the cause, but it's something that is different, and they will go because they like the cause. So I'll give you an example. Years ago, many years ago, when I was in my early 20s, there was an event the Red Cross did, and it was purely a kind of blind dating event. It was in a massive venue. It had nothing to do with the Red, it was for the Red Cross, but actually it was trying to get in a new audience. And by doing that, you filled in a questionnaire online and they set you up with somebody so that you would turn up at the event, meet your blind date. And the whole thing was experience running up to the event. So you paid up front, and it was all that kind of like questionnaire you're going to get set up with. And it was for that particular age group. They may not necessarily, have given to the cause otherwise, but Red Cross is a cause they all knew about. And what was interesting was that once we went there, nobody really had the time or inclination to want to hear a speech about the Red Cross. So this was because it was busy and people were having fun. So actually, for Red Cross, they made their money. That's what they needed to do. And they raised a bit of awareness about who they are. But that was their objective, and it worked for them. And again, you know, thinking about if that's going to be my type of event, am I going to bother having lots of leaflets and stuff in the event, or are people going to be too busy just having fun? Or am I going to do the awareness raising before people actually come to the event? And when they get there, they can just let their hair down. And time-based as well. When are you going to do this? The events take time. Okay, they take time, and you've got to really plan ahead. So again, this is a repetition, so I won't go through this, but make sure your objectives are SMART. Why do you need them? Because you have to focus with events, okay? And it prevents you from drifting. And also, you need to know, as an events planner, who do you need to work with? It's collaborative working. So which teams do I need to work with? Who do I need internally, and who do I need externally? What resources do I need? Who do I need to communicate with? What is the success criteria for us? Because when you evaluate it, what is that? You need to define all that, because otherwise, how will you know if the events worked and for you to repeat it or not? And like I said, simplify your objectives. Don't have too many, because otherwise you've got too many decisions to make and it makes it cluttered. So begin with the end. What do you intend to do and why? What is the motivating factor for doing it for you? What would motivate your audience? Your event objectives, do they fit with your strategic plan? And do they fit with your skills and experience? And, you know, is it realistic given the time frame you've said you're going to do it and your budget constraints? So it's really, really, really important to think about that. Your timeline, again, start at the end. If your event's going to be next October, what do you want to have achieved by next September? Work backwards, because that always helps for you to know, I need to have this done by then, otherwise it won't work. It's importance of that kind of cross work as well, you know, coordinating an event with community activity internally and externally. You might be doing stuff internally, but actually there's things that you might have to liaise externally, but you need to do it in advance. And if you haven't done it, then you know what's going to happen. So certain licenses or legal stuff, or communication with partners or with the local authority, or if you're having a street party, for example, you need to get the permission. So really, don't forget the external communication that you need to have. So sit down and think about who that will be with and why you need to have it, and how long in advance you need to have it. So there's a lot of pre-prep you need to think about, because when you're doing all this, you might think, oh my God, actually, realistically, we haven't got the time for this, because they take 6 months to get back to us. So we need to maybe change or change our objectives or change our date. So again, really think about these things. You know, it takes at least 6 months that you're pre-planning, you're organizing within that kind of 5 to 1 month, and then you've got your final prep. And in that week before, it really is the stuff that cannot be done any much more in advance. So that could be the actual people preparing the food, for example, or, you know, so really think about things that need to happen in that week. They need to be arranged in advance, but they cannot be prepared until that particular week. And I've put post-event down because this happens a lot. We organize the event, we haven't got the time, event's done, dusted, we move on. No, because otherwise that's wasting your time. Post-event is key, because you want to capture the audience that came to it. And you want to see whether it's worked or not. Otherwise, what is the point? Try and make, if you are going to go down events fundraising, try and think of it as something that can be repeated rather than one-off. And you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. So your post-event activities are really, really important. So again, before you get creative, you think, right, I want to make sure I meet our objectives, meet our audience's needs, fitting the overall charity purpose, and we want to make sure that what we've got breaks a boredom barrier. So, you know, the creativity is quite realistic as well. Then you start planning ahead, okay? Then you start, so you've thought about all the fundamental things that I've talked about. Then you start sitting down and go, right, okay, now this is the fun bit. Okay, let's think about opportunities, what we could do, what kind of event. We know who our audience is, we know that it fits with the strategy, we know what our objectives are. Now let's have a look and get creative. What kind of event do you think would be quite fun? Let's have a few ideas, let's bounce around a few ideas. Oh, and let's preempt any clashes. It's always good to have a diary of all the different things that are happening within the country, whether it's bank holidays, whether it's half terms, whether it's, you know, think about all those things. Get that knowledge and think, right, okay, who's going to help me with this? Who can I delegate? And how we're going to communicate this? Clear roles are very, very important. Okay, because it is project planning, and if one part of it's missing, if there's a gap, then you're dependable on people, and if they don't deliver, that could have an impact on what you're doing. So then creative prompts, again, the fun bit. Oh, are we going to have a theme? You know, is it going to be seasonal? Is it going to be an exhibition? Are we going to base it on a national theme, or is it going to be like an International Women's Day, or you know, how are we going to do this? What are the gaps currently? What's not happening that people are really desperate to do right now? What's on trend? You know, any particular TV programs, any particular music, any sports, theatre, what can we do? Like, for example, Secret Cinema is an event where you go and usually they kind of pick films that kind of on trend, whether it's like 80s are coming back, whether it's Dirty Dancing, or whether it's James Bond film, or thinking about what's on trend that we can piggyback on. Who are our competitors? Is anyone else doing those kind of events right now? Anyone near us doing the same event? Oh my God, we need to make sure there's not a clash. We need to find out. And again, you know, is it something to help refugees? You know, could be color themed? And do we need to work with community and volunteer groups, and how we're going to do that? How we're going to get them involved? So again, all the fun bits also need to have that kind of foundational strategic planning behind it, so you know that it's going to work. Then then becomes, again, the serious bit, your income versus your expenditure. Do you have any budget? And again, like I said, don't say we'll get sponsorship, because unless it's in the bank, it's not counted as money. So what's your target for this event? And what have you based this target on? You know, what have you based it on? Is it realistic? And for what you're charging people, will they attend? Will you make this? And how much you're going to spend on your actual event? Do you have any of the resources available? Is it going to work with the timing? Is it realistic and achievable? So really think about that, because you could get really creative and get excited, but actually this is a massive constraint. Time and money are constraints when you're planning an event, which is crucial. It's a big part of project planning, time and finances. So really make sure that they are not a constraint for you. And then you go to nitty-gritty, like choosing a date. And again, I won't go into this detail, but think about, you know, what's happened nationally. Is it going to clash with an election day? What's the weather going to be like? And in this country, unfortunately, even in the summer, you know, if we have an outdoor event planned, what's your backup? If it's an outdoor concert, what if it rains? What's your backup? Are you offering people a chance to cancel, or an alternative, or are you going to have it anyway? Be upfront with people, so they know what the backup is, what the solution is, or can they cancel? Can they get a refund? If they can't get a refund, you know, really think about traveling time, transport links. Is there going to be a strike, or what's going to happen if there's a tube strike, or a bus strike, or a train strike? Is a venue going to be available? Make sure it's not double booked. Your speaker, if you're promising a particular speaker or a particular actor, actress, whatever, you know, what if they don't turn up? What's your backup? And what are you going to say in your events information that, you know, should this not happen, what's your backup? So really think about that, because people might only be coming to an event for one particular thing. And if that one particular thing is not there, what is your backup? Again, when you're choosing your venue, if you're going for a face-to-face event, what were your objectives in the first place, and will it fit your audience? Will they travel to it? Where's it got good acoustics for speaker requirements? You know, just check their website, go and do a recce, never not do a recce of it, go and check it. Is it interesting? Is it unique? Is it free? And always be very careful if someone's offering you a free venue, that it is a certainty. Because if someone says, I'll give it to you free unless someone else comes and pays and books a venue, no, you need that certainty. That's very important, because a venue is your main thing. Think about things you need, and think about any legal and VAT issues you need to bear in mind beforehand, any insurance you need to get. All those things beforehand, because you might decide on a particular event and realize, actually, oh my God, we're not covered for it, or the building's not covered for it. So really think about all that stuff that you need to bear in mind, you know, whether you need first aid for it, St. John's ambulance for it, you know, what do you need, disability access, all those different things. And, you know, how am I going to monitor and evaluate my event, and how am I going to communicate it to different stakeholders? Volunteers is really important. It's the glue that can hold community fundraising and events together. And I know we don't all have the resources to have a volunteer management program, but you must have something at least basic for your volunteers, to make sure they know where they stand. What are they getting out of it? Is there anything that they can get out of it? You know, is there an induction for them? You know, do you praise and champion them? You know, what are you doing with your volunteers? Be clear about that, really clear, so there's consistency along the line. You know, do their expenses get covered? Do they get to come to the recce with you? Do they get any training? Why are they volunteers for you? Really important. Your volunteers, you know, is having the expertise as well, and you know, think, okay, I've got this group of volunteers that actually have got these skills be relevant for this part of the event. I've got that group of volunteers that are really good face-to-face, others prefer behind the scenes. Then data protection, DBS checked. Do I need to have them DBS checked? What's the age group of our people attending our events? How am I going to recruit my volunteers? There's a lot to think about. Don't overwhelm yourself, but be clear as to what it is you need from volunteers and what it is you're going to offer them. I've put participant care in because, again, this can be overlooked. When you're organizing an event, there's different people you have to communicate. Communication within the staff, within the team, communication within press, potentially, communication to your volunteers, communication to people that are attending your event. How often are you going to communicate to them? And what's, you know, is it going to be initial thing with more information, and then you get just a tweet reminder? How are you going to do it? What's the repeat process going to be? And also think about health and safety as well. Make sure that there's that participant care on the night as well. If you're getting sponsors, you know, what do they need from you? Have you got the contract signed? How are you going to make them happy as well? If you've promised them something, make sure you deliver it. And of course, the volunteers, which I've talked about. Risks. I know it's really depressing, but you must outline the risks at the beginning. What's going to be high risk for us? What's going to be low risk? If it's low risk, if it happens, fine, we'll deal with it. If it's high risk, what's our alternative? And your set budget. Think about what you want to get, how much you've got to spend, and think about what you've done historically, if you have. Always factor in contingency, because we always think that we've got everything covered and things happen last minute. Think about your best and worst scenarios and be realistic when it comes to sponsorship, and make sure the return on investment. Now, this is an interesting one, because if you think about and analyzing it, you've got your net income versus your total costs. So you might make, say, £10,000 an event, but that's not necessarily your net income, because it might be that you've spent 4,000 of it on the event and you're only making £6,000 your net income. So you've got to be careful you don't mix the two together. So, you know, if you're bringing in 500, then it's costing you 50. It's not bad. If you're bringing in 12,000, then it's costing you £3,000. If you're bringing in 10, it's costing you 10. Ooh, I've broken even. But it depends on your objective. Because if your objective wasn't to raise money, but it was to raise awareness, and you've met that and you've also broken even, then great. If you make a loss, but your objective wasn't to make money, then it's not the end of the world. You obviously don't want to make a huge loss, but again, it depends on what your objectives were in the first place. So again, that return on investment is very much objective based. But ideally, if you want to make money, you want to at least make twice the amount. So really think about your expenditure in advance. Okay, I'm just going to quickly give you an example of what's a fixed cost and what's a variable cost. So there's going to be certain things that your event cannot happen without. That's usually your venue. And for example, if you need a photographer, you know, if you need to do advertising, you know, equipment that you need to get. But variables could be stuff like food, because it depends on how many people are attending. So that could change. And sponsorship is on zero until you actually have it. So variable it depends on how many people attend, whereas fixed is irrespective. You need to have paid for that in advance. So again, really think about it and note it down. And then think about how you're going to communicate. Communication is really important. So often people have organized amazing events, but they just haven't communicated it, not enough, and not in the right way, and not using the right communication platform. So you've got to have an ongoing communications plan. You've really got to think about who your audience is and what platform you're using for them, and key messages for different stages of the event timeline. You know, initially when people are about to pay up front, they want to know exactly what they're getting. Once they've paid, then the next reminder is something different. It's not all the information again. It's kind of things that are going to get them excited. And if there's a way you can get their money up front, great. But if there isn't, then how are you going to guarantee for them they're going to turn up to the event? And then you've got different channels. You know, you've got your social media, you've got your personal word of mouth, you've got, you know, are you going to use the media at all, local or national? You know, you're going to do it through online competitions. How? What's going to work best for you? And you've used your volunteers as well. So you have your message objective, you think about your audience, the key message at different times, which communication method you're going to use, when you're going to do it, and how often. So it's really, really important to get all that right, because if you don't communicate, you don't get the people there. And you need to manage your expectations. It's really, really important to manage your expectations, so there's no surprises that they wouldn't like, unless it's a good surprise, obviously. So then when you're organizing it nitty-gritty, try and have a manager's manual. Get more than one quote, obviously. It's really important to get more than one quote. See what these people's reputations are for previous events. See if you can get testimonials. People you need to liaise with: police, fire, first aid, licenses, permissions, insurance, the equipment hire. Do you have the equipment already, or do you need to hire it? Does the equipment work? Do you need lighting? You know, who you're going to bring, what's transport going to be like, deposits, contracts, tickets. Again, it depends on your event, how big it is, what scale it is. Do you need signage? Do you need, and because, you know, more often than not, I used to work at the Barbican, if you know that. It's a really, really big art centre in London, and they provide all art forms, and from theatre to cinema to music. And the event itself could be fantastic, but the experience leading to the event has to work, because the Barbican's quite a beast of a place, and the building is quite complex, and we need to make sure that people had signage, because if they couldn't find where they were going, arrived late for the event, or flustered, it just ruins the event for them. So the customer experience needs to be good from right from the beginning of when you've promoted the event to the end, and the after and the post event. I ran a 10K for a charity which I won't name, and I raised money for them. I never even got a thank you, and I never even got a little free gift they promised to give me, and it just put me off. So again, don't promise things you can't deliver, and make sure that you're going to monitor your objectives, and you know, try and get formal and informal feedback if you can. on the night or afterwards through, they can do it on their phone, a very short questionnaire, see if you can get feedback. I'm just quickly touching on virtual events here. That's worked for a lot of people, and certainly I know from experience now, it really works well with trustees meetings, because quite often trying to get trustees together on a day in the same room has been hard, but now it really works because we can all meet virtually, which is great. But again, who's your audience? Some people are desperate to get back into face-to-face events, but if you think, well, we can't afford it right now, we're going to test the ground running, we're going to do virtual, okay, fine. But even virtual takes time. What are your goals? What are your objectives? What's the best virtual platform for your audience? Pick the right time, and also consider the time zones as well in different countries. Promote it in advance and have your agenda clear so people know what they're getting, what is happening virtually. How are you going to engage your audience? I mean, here, for example, this is an online event. You knew you're going to get an hour with me, then but you also know that there's a chance for you to have your questions answered. There's a Q&A, so you know that in advance. You know what the agenda of the event is, and it helps because then it enables you to go, is this for me or is it not for me? And prepare for an alternative platform, because if things go wrong, what's the alternative going to be? And always have a post-event follow-up. So really think about that. This is extra information, which we've only got a few minutes, but I'm going to cover it. Legal implications, again, license and permissions, local authority, countryside rights, equal access, disabled access. What you're doing, will it have an environmental impact? So even small things, are you going to use plastic cups? Will that be frowned upon? How are you going to make it seem like actually you're respecting the environment in your event and you've thought about that? Health and safety, food hygiene, any expenses for volunteers, any, lotteries, raffles, which I think is covered in a Q&A, which I will cover later. Again, all the contractual considerations, equipment use, signage, who's going to be the main contact on the event, on the night, where are you going to all be going, who's going to be stationed where, request copies of certificates, insurance, risk assessments, review things, don't just sign it. If you have anybody who can help you legally for pro bono to read something, get them to read it. Confirmations, get people's confirmations, get it in writing, okay? And if you've got information packs, make sure they're all ready and updated, and have things, photos, interviews arranged in advance, because the beauty of events, well, it's a beauty of event that can be quite fluid, but sometimes it can't always go according to plan 100%. But as long as you have an agenda, it's like, if it's a little bit before or after, it's not the end of the world, but just as long as there's some clarity as to what's going to happen. And also, if you're going to go down the corporate route, why would a company want to sponsor you? Corporates have different needs to trusts and foundations, and they're doing it philanthropically, of course, yes, but that's a donation. But a sponsor is not just doing it philanthropically. A sponsor is doing it because they also need something from it. It could be a cheaper way for them to meet their audience, or a cheaper way for them to advertise. It could be increasing their sales because actually they know your audience, and that's the audience demographic they want to get into. They might want to do an online partnership with you. It might meet with their corporate social responsibility agenda. They might want to access your members, obviously data protection, we need to adhere to that. They might want to do it because actually it's a way of getting their employees involved, and it's a good way of retaining them. Your events might be great opportunity for corporate hospitality for them. So if you're an arts organization, they might want to come to rehearsals or stuff that money can't buy, experiences that they might want to be able to do. So really think, if I were a sponsor, if I were a corporate, and that's something that I might get Chris to kind of touch on as well, being a corporate, what kind of things they value is important to them as well. So again, really think about it. But I think most importantly, it is hard work, but you need to remember to have fun. And actually, Chris, while you're here, can you touch on that a little bit in terms of, it's important for charities to put a corporate head on. What are things that you think are fundamental things to really think about if they want sponsorship?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, my head's whirring with all the really good areas that you've raised here, Layla. And I can imagine the conversations that everyone on this call is going to have with their CEOs and their trustees to say, just, wait a minute, let's think about this event, and trying to bring in some of this best practice, perhaps a little subtly, so you're able to prove the value of events. And from a corporate perspective, I've got two examples that will hopefully illustrate 2 points. And I said this on previous webinars, and I'll say it again. I really empathise with everyone on this call, because you're one charity trying to work with many different corporates that have got many different views and many different interests. So it's a really tricky task to understand what corporates are after and what is going to interest them. But the first point I make actually is, and it might be more unique to us, but I would say don't focus on the organisation, focus on the people. So passionate people have driven, I think, the best part of our fundraising. When someone really gets involved with the charity, really believes in it, that's when fundraising really takes off, that they get involved with events and activities. And then the company supports in terms of time, volunteering, matching. So that really fulfills that spirit, I guess, of our employee supported program is, we get behind everything you want to do. And I'm going to call someone out, a gentleman called Colin in our Manchester office, who is a super fundraiser. So he works with Derrien House Children's Hospice, and he helps organise, organises the lion's share of an event called Stars and Cars every year, and it raises tens of thousands every single year. And it's him, it's his passion, it's his belief, it's his commitment. I can't make anyone in our business do that if they don't have it. So yes, I'd encourage you to find those people that are passionate, that are in your supporter base, and then maybe flip it a little bit, work out where they work, and see how the organisations that they work for might support them. And then the second point I'd make, I guess, is this point about combined interests again. So if you're working with a business, look at what they do and how they do it, who they work with, who their customers are, who their communities are, and how events and fundraising can really align to that and support and strengthen that. So an example of that was one of our businesses is called Lysits. They are huge in the rural community, and they helped organise and sponsor. And so this is where that kind of brand and reputation piece overlaps into this fundraising area. An event, a launch ball for the British Eventing Support Trust. So it's a great example, I think, of just really closely aligned interests. So that's a partner that business really wants to get to know, and working with them to organise an event. We get to know them better. We can support them in a deeper way than actually, just here's a donation, or here's some support on lots of different fronts. Logistic, in kind, finance, fundraising, a really rounded way that we can support you, that is going to strengthen our relationship with you for the long term, and potentially expose us to kind of new partners and new supporters that you would invite along that we wouldn't attract as an organisation, as a business, that you've got leverage with as a charity. So that's the second area, is this really kind of aligned interests. But hopefully those are two examples that might make sense.
No, really, really good examples, and definitely true. And I would say one more thing I would say is sometimes an event is actually a way of getting corporates involved in the first place, bizarrely. So for example, I used to work for an organisation called Parenting UK, which is now part of Family Lives. And it was really hard to get core income because we worked with parenting practitioners, not directly with parents. So a way that I tried to do it was to introduce a corporate membership, whereby we'd go into companies and actually we would provide them with kind of parenting workshops, parenting packs, and it really catered to that particular you had, whether it was parents of primary school children or parents of under 5, or you'll have a lot of employees who are parents. But again, promoting that, for us, we did it through an event, and again we used what we had. So we didn't have a lot of resources, and I literally had to sit down on my own and think of the best person either in the CSR department or the human resources to contact and give them brief information. Because if you just email randomly, you might as well put the email in the bin. You need to have that contact to say, look, we're hosting this, you will be getting the invitation, so they know it's coming. And that can take a lot of time. Sometimes it's time, and even though time is money, it's your salary, but you need to invest in it. And because we didn't have any money for the venue, one of our trustees was an MP, and he was able to let us have the House of Parliament, a room there. And again, timing, because we wanted to really get the decision makers to come from all the big companies like Accenture, but then we had M&S, we had JP Morgan. They're not going to come bang in the middle of the day, and they all work late. So we ended up having it at breakfast meeting, because they would all come before they went to work. And that was a way of launching it, which really worked. And another example I will give you is we did an event when I worked at a charity called Kids. I did an event with JP Morgan, which was, at the time, it was before David Cameron had come in, so people knew he was about to come into power, and I had to get him to come and do a speech. So all the corporates kind of wanted to come and all got tables, and it was like a big function. So that worked because JP Morgan themselves gave us the venue, so we didn't have to spend money on the venue, and people were happy to buy tables and you know, donate really cool prizes. Again, it was our audience, it was the audience that worked well. But then we had employees, and I think Chris was talking about match funding and the kind of passion of the staff. We did this thing where JP Morgan said, right, whatever our employees raise, we'll match. But I went in and I had a conversation with them. It's understanding the nature of people's work. And JP Morgan said, right, it's got to be something that works within the building, because we've got traders, they've got to be on call. We've got, you know, people cannot always leave the building. So what is it that can work and is practical? And it's that understanding of how that corporate culture worked. So what we did was we had a big tree in their foyer. It was a Christmas. And we then set this thing up where we had someone downstairs working on the admin, and people were able to donate on their intranet. It didn't matter how much they were able to donate, but whoever donated, their name would come down. We would know about it. We would go up and tie a balloon to their chair, so that everybody would know that person would donated. And it just means that everybody wants a balloon on their chair, because no one wants to look like the person who's not donating. But every time a balloon went up, a bauble went up on the tree downstairs. And again, thousands of pounds were raised, and everybody was able to do it. They could donate as little or as large amount as they wanted. And then JP Morgan matched it. So again, it's understanding and working with the corporate culture that you want to work with is really important. But I think that's an hour, and I will pass on to Kathy, who's hopefully got some of your questions. Yeah, Kathy, are you all right with that? And thank you everybody for your time. Okay.
Okay, good. And I reiterate Chris's point. Fabulous. Thank you, Layla, not for everything you've just said verbally, but I know how much extra information is in those slides that people can go and view on the website in the recording. And they do make some great sort of checklists for conversations they can take away. Again, brilliant. I'm going to come back to something you were talking about near the end there. Somebody had asked about licensing for raffles, and audience, I'm going to give Layla the slight caveat that we've got audience based in Scotland, England, Wales and Uganda. So she can't cover the law on licensing in all those countries. I suspect she'll give the broad sort of English law and what the implications are here and other things that you might have to think about. So yeah, licensing for raffles and that kind of thing, Layla. Thank you. A bit more on that.
Definitely. Again, that's really important, because even if you're PTA and doing a school function, it's really important to work out what's your event going to be about. Are you making, what's the profit margin? Are you going to be making a profit, or is it going to be purely charitable? And there's a gambling commission which clearly explains to you, and it gives you a breakdown of the kind of event that you're going to have, and therefore whether you need a licensing for it or not. Because for some raffles and tombolas, for some you might not, but for some it covers, it's under the gambling license. So you always need to check. So go to the Gambling Commission website. It's very clear, it gives you lots of detail. But also, if you're going to serve alcohol, you need to go to your, follow the rules legally and go to your local council, and you need to fill out forms, and you need to work with timing. Don't leave these things last minute, because if you don't get your license in time, you will not be able to run your event. So it depends on of the margin of how much you're planning to make. So go to the Gambling Commission, and also go to your local council, and they will have all the relevant forms, and you will then know what you need to get. Hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Layla. Something else that come, it's a cost of living question really, and it's this dilemma almost. It's a moral dilemma and a practical dilemma. What do we do about putting ticket prices up? I know you've touched upon this kind of, how do we put the ticket price up when our donors are already suffering the same cost of living impacts we are?
I think it's a really interesting one, and I hope I'm not generalizing, but I really also think it depends where you live in the UK. And I think in London, because the cost of living is higher and people's pay reflects that, there might be slightly more forgiving towards spending a bit more, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the case everywhere. I think at the moment there's that combination of people being starved and desperate to go to events, but also people wanting to budget. And I would say, if there's a way where, if you are putting the cost up, think about it and see what are they getting for it. Because yes, they can be forgiving because it's a charitable event, but equally, are they getting value for money? And if there's a way that you could just have it all up front in the ticket price, so when they feel they go to the event and they don't have to worry about spending any more money, then great. Or even if it means that they get something up front. And for example, it could be, I mean, it's an event. It was my birthday party on Friday. I had about 80 people coming, and I had to really sit down and work out with the venue what I wanted to do and how we wanted to decorate it and stuff. But I chose to spend my money on, rather than food, I chose to spend it on people getting at least 1 or 2 drinks when they arrive, because that got everything going, and the rest they spent on the bar. And they didn't mind that, because it was nice when they walked in, they knew they were going to get there. Well, they didn't know whether it was a nice surprise. They got a couple of drinks. I chose not to have food because I thought, actually, by the time it starts, people would have eaten beforehand. So again, be transparent with people, and just make sure and think, would I spend that money? Ask yourself, if you think you are that potential audience, would you spend that money? Because, and also, would you travel? There's travel costs, cabs back home. Factor all that in and think, okay, will they still get value for money? That's all I would say, is people are up for having a good time because they are desperate and they want to get back into the swing of things. So you've got that on your side, but just then be mindful of ensuring they get value for money.
Yeah, really good point. I mean, it's one of the premises of sales as well. I work a lot in sales, you know, think about value, not cost. Yeah. So really useful. Thanks very much. I should have said at the start, we won't be able to answer all questions that have come in, but I have picked some that came in during registration and some that have come in from today. So I want to pick it over for one of these Q&A submitted questions today. Layla, put you on the spot a bit, that's why I'm stumbling a bit. The charity challenge, you know, could you run us a 1-day course on the charity challenge, please? But yeah, it's a charity that focuses on wild tiger conservation in India, and they were approached about having a charity challenge event. So they're just thinking about, you know, who's got experience of that, any top tips. And I will also invite the audience, because I know there's hospices and that kind of thing out there in the audience, and I know you're really, really good on the charity challenge type events, hospices and cancer support organisations and that kind of thing. So please, anyone in the audience, put any links or info that you might have in the chat. But Layla, any sort of top tips? Somebody's asked us to do the charity challenge. Where do we start?
I think it's a very, very specific cause, and it's very niche, which in itself is a plus. And I think with the charity challenge, it's an interesting one, because, you know, years ago, people would end up, you know, going to India and doing treks, or actually visiting it, and then people sponsoring them for kind of doing that. And that's kind of changed a bit, like, because I think people have just had a bit of an overfill. And I think, and I would say with something like this, is really thinking about how it could really link to the cause, and something that could give it again that uniqueness. So the event reflects the uniqueness of the cause itself. Does that make sense? But that's, I think, the best answer I could give, because it's something that would reflect and complement the cause. So the people that would be interested in that cause would be interested in that type of event as well, whatever that charity challenge would be. So does that,
that does make sense. Yeah, somebody was asking actually, what's the charity challenge? Hang on, if I'm starting an event, I should know about this. What's the charity challenge? So I'm explaining it's something like a hospice holding a sponsored marathon or a mountain climb. So say a mountain climb might be it's a really good fit for a survivors overcome adversity.
Yeah.
That kind of thing is a really good fit for that kind of a charity. Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an example. When I worked at the British Deaf Association years ago, and we took a group to Mexico, trekking and rafting. But actually, what's that got to do with anything? We ended up also, our final point was taking them to a village in Mexico where everybody in the village was deaf. And again, that was quite unique, and it reflected what we were about. So, and the people that wanted to come on the challenge, people that were actually interested and were willing to raise the money themselves. And I think with charity challenges, you've got to know your audience and what's going to motivate them, because they need to raise the money themselves to be able to come to this. So it's really important to know that people are going to raise that money. And you almost kind of want to have like a process where you just there's certain questions that you need to know, that you feel confident that if people are going to do charity challenges for you, they are the people that will actually do it and stick to it. And that's really, really important.
Layla, I find out more about you every time we have a webinar. Taking groups to India and parties for birthday parties for 80 people. I love it. Thanks very much. Okay, thanks for that. Something else that's come in, again, you've touched upon it, but maybe Chris have views as well. It's this whole idea of, we're very aware of exhausting our pool of regular donors, and perhaps very much that in the community context, and again impacted by cost of living issues at the moment. How and when do we decide to move to corporate support and not exhaust that pool? I suppose it's about, is it a fundraising mix question? I don't know.
This is a very good question, and I think it's actually, you will exhaust people, and you've got to be very mindful of not asking them for money over and over again. Now, there's certain events which are great fun, and you might find your loyal supporters will go annually, because actually it's a night out for them. It's great. The money's going to charity, but they probably would have spent that anyway. And it's a night they all get together and look forward to it, and that's great. But if you're constantly asking your loyal supporters for money at different times, I would say you actually need an event to thank them. And not ask them for money, but actually you need to think about how you're going to maintain those loyal supporters by thanking them, make them feel valued. So then when down the line, again, you're back to asking them for money, they're okay about giving it. So again, it's having that audience of thinking, I want to reach a new audience, I want to do something different, but also I want to maintain these people, I want to thank them, and how am I going to do it? Even if it's online or a cost-effective way of thanking them, to make them realize how appreciative you are, and how without them you wouldn't be able to continue as you are. I hope that makes sense, because then you're bringing life back into them again.
I definitely I'd endorse that, and I went from marathon challenge to marathon challenge to London to Paris bike ride. And I got a bit of a reputation as the kind of chugger in the team, who was always doing something for charity. And actually, yeah, it dried up a bit. So yeah, I think this sense of events being more than fundraising actually is a very interesting thing, because those events that I did didn't give me any understanding of the charities themselves. Actually, there were some things on the fringe of that that they got me involved in or invited me along to, which gave me that involvement. So yeah, think about those events and activities as, investing in your supporter base and your partnership with those individuals and that organisation, and how that's going to bear fruit long term. Yeah, and that thank you piece is really interesting actually as well. That, you know, don't underestimate the power of a thank you, and the power of bringing your supporters closer to your work and them seeing and experiencing it. You know, I think, you know, that is the thing that keeps people coming back. That is the thing which you know, ignites that passion, and you know, they can never walk away then, because they've seen it, experienced it, believed in it, and they'll want to come back and support you in the future.
So they just feel like they're part of a family. So then becomes a regular thing. Then they become they will have, like, you have brand loyalty to a particular supermarket, you will have loyalty to that particular charity because you feel like part of a family and you know where your money's going.
Yeah, I think it's important to, you were talking about the value of a thank you and that kind of thing. And you were talking about the importance of comms and your communications to supporters, how you are thanking people as well. I know that my family are big supporters of a vegan charity, but they're also massive environmentalists. So when they get lots of paper communication and all sorts of pamphlets and everything through the post, they kind of, I like your thank you, but could have sent me an email or something. So think about those kinds of things, because the tighter we can get our sort of common values with our supporters, the more likely I think that they are to stay with us. We might have time for one or two more questions. I just want to mention, Alex, your question about having an asset transfer of a community centre and setting it up, and how would we advise? I really don't think we can begin on that topic right now, but I do know that there's a capital funds type webinar on the Benefact Group website, I believe, from some of the previous ones we've done. So I'm going to put you in that direction. And then Layla, I want you to come back to you know, the face-to-face, the in-person or the online events and all that kind of thing. Certainly as training providers, we had to change overnight for everything being provided online. We've spent the last year trying to reintroduce face-to-face training. I also have lots of conversations with boards of trustees who are saying that they're having their monthly meetings online, and then saying, right, all we're going to do is have a get-together event just to see each other again, and people aren't showing up. People are not coming back out in person, and that's affected, it seems to me, you know, no scientific data to back this up, but it seems to me that's affected by both paid for events or free events and work related events or funding or learning related events. What are we thinking about? Hybrid?
Again, this is an interesting one, is that I think, again, it depends on your event objectives. And I think if your objective is to make some money, I would say always try, whether it's online or face-to-face for a start, to charge something upfront. Because when something is free, unless it's a thank you event or something completely different, people might not bother turning up, whether it's online or face-to-face. So that's one thing to think about. The second thing is, yes, there is that practical element. I think a lot more people are happy to have work meetings or informative meetings or conferences or courses online. But I also think that people are not enticed to have social events online, because it's just 2 years of doing that, and people just want it. It's not the same. As much as we think it's the same, it's not the same. You know, it's much more fluid to go in a room and you know, just chat to people, and even networking events are hard to do online, because quite often not everybody puts themselves on video. Then it's, you know, there's that, and then it's, you know, who are you trying to talk to? There's so many people. How do you know, unless you do breakout rooms. So, and I personally am not a fan of breakout rooms. I do it sometimes if I have to, but I try and get us all engaged, because I think in a breakout room, kind of left, you know. So I think you've got to gauge on, okay, is this event best in person or not? Can we get away with this event online? Or will it kill it? Will it take away? Because some events will just not have the magic if they're online, and others will work fine because I have a different reason, different rationale. And I think if it's an information sharing one, I mean, during COVID, we had quite a lot of work events where we had to, one of the charities that I worked for, we had to pitch. There was 100 of us, and we did it over 2 nights. We had to pitch online, and then we got selected online, and it was all happened online, and it was fine. She was sat down. It was 8 o'clock at night because we had to work the timing, and that was fine. It worked. But if you want an event where you want your supporters to engage and feel part of the family, and so it needs to be face to face. I just think you've got to really work out what the event's actually for. And if you do it online, it might just not give the magic that you really are hoping for. So that's what I would say. It's very much a subjective choice based on your audience and your objective.
Yeah,
I definitely endorse that as, yeah, within a business, spending a lot of time online now and working in a more hybrid way. I'd say that there's a perception that you can just organise an online event much more easily and much more quickly, and in some respects you can. But I think they've got to be as well managed as Kathy and Layla will testify for this event. You know, you can't just very quickly organise it. You have got to think about it and plan it in potentially as big a way as you would do a face-to-face event. Arguably more so, because the engagement and the way that you're going to make it an interesting event isn't the ways that you would traditionally do it when you're meeting people face-to-face. You've got to think a bit harder about, right, how's this going to be a great experience for people now? It's in a different way. But obviously reach, you know, you could reach areas of your supporter base that you couldn't have imagined. You know, we wouldn't all be in a room together today on this webinar. So we're achieving something different by it being online. So maybe there are areas of your supporter base that you can engage with a Zoom event for an hour of an evening, which, you know, you would have never got along to an actual face-to-face event. I suppose costs, you know, can be lower. But as I said, you know, they've got to be well managed. They've got to be fun. They've got to be engaging, because yes, I, like Layla, I'm a bit tired of some online time, I must admit. So yeah, definitely inject some fun.
yeah.
I mean, from experience now, when I get Zoom events for just a social event, blah blah, I just, and they're free, but I can't think of anything worse sitting behind Zoom with a glass of wine right now. I just can't be bothered with it. Whereas, you know, if I'm doing an event, I will happily sign on to, you know, an event and go, because I don't mind.
And to a glass of wine.
With my coffee. I don't mind. But evening socials on Zoom, I'm just like, oh, you know, I just, you know, I'm not saying I can be bothered going, but if I'd paid for it, and if it was something that I was, you know, getting a group of my friends together, or I knew what I was getting at the event, then I would go.
Yeah. And we've been on Zoom all day,
yeah,
haven't we? A lot
yeah,
of the
exactly.
time. So to have my social on Zoom as well, yeah, it can be taxing. Somebody else made a really good point. Thanks, Catherine, in the chat. Particularly, she suffers from ME, but for all sorts of reasons. You were saying about doing things differently, Chris. You know, look at the diversity. A lot of our organisations have been able to improve in our reach by going online for all sorts of reasons, whether it's to do with people's physical limitations, people's mental health challenges, costs, geography, all those kinds of things. So there's benefits there as well. Yeah. We are almost out of time, and I'm not going to start new questions. If there are any specific questions that have come into us in the registration and so on, Layla and I'll have a look at those. If we can send you something that says, oh, here's a link on something that you're talking about. Thanks for those that have put links and suggestions around the charity challenge type events into the chat. We'll make sure that you get the chat in the support materials as well. With regards what you will receive, and we do not send I've said many times, we don't send the slides out separately, but the recording of this webinar will be on the Benefact Group website by next week, and therefore you'll have access to be able to view the slides. And of course, once you're into the website, you can also take the link and be able to share that with anybody else that you'd like to see. There's an awful lot of comments coming through as well. And again, to reiterate your point that people have just found such useful information here to go and start conversations, even when they have been maybe running events and, you know, stuck into this for a few years in hybrid or real world and so on. So they've got lots of information to go away with and start those conversations. Are there any particular points either of you would both like to make before I say the final goodbye and thank you, so we get a nice end to our recording?
I mean,
always thinking practical.
I'd like to say, if you're going to take away anything from today, is go and ask those questions, which I said at the beginning. Ask those questions. Is it for me? Do we have the resources? Is it for us right now? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Who's our audience? And also, don't forget, I know that it feels like COVID's over for some, but for some people it's not. For some people, they still have a low immune system. They're still worried. It's still a big deal. And I just think also factor that in and just think, okay, if I do need to do it face to face, I need to make sure that people feel comfortable. So just don't assume that it's over, it's behind us, because for some it's not. So bear that in mind and just really ask yourself those questions. Would I go? Why are we doing this? What are our objectives? So over to you, Chris.
Yeah, I just say on behalf of the Benefact Group, you know, we're very pleased to know many of you, and we want to know those of you we don't better. So yeah, please make use of the resources that we've got on offer. Let us know if we can do more for you. So benefactgroup.com has got all of those resources on, and in particular movementforgood.com. So our £1,000 donations to any charity, anywhere, doing anything. So if you haven't had one yet, we want to give one to you.
Super. Thanks both. And I reiterate, thanks for everybody from Benefact Group and DSC and Layla who contributed to organising this event. We'll sign off now. Thank you everybody for joining us. Have a great rest of your day and some fabulous events ahead of you. Bye-bye.